action. We're ready to go. Okay, so this is a video for my friends who are asking me about my pattern for making the medical mask. Now, I'm going to make this disclaimer right now. These are not medical masks. These are masks to go over N95s, or you can put a filter inside. These are handmade masks out of cotton. We're not claiming that these save you from getting anything. We're just giving them to people who are going to use them to put over stuff or put filters inside. Okay? So, I'm going to prep my area, put on my glasses because I didn't put the contacts in today. Using antibacterial wipes, we wipe down every single area, even wipe down the children to make sure that everything is clear. We've all sanitized our hands and made sure that everything is clean for this process. I even wiped down my scissors and cutting things, wiped down my machines and everything like that. So, to get started, now remember, I have a lot of things that seamstresses use. I have rollers and things like that. Use whatever you have to make this stuff happen, like when we're cutting the pattern. So here are the materials. 100% cotton. Go ahead and pre-wash it and dry it because it could shrink after you make a mask. Number one. Number two, you need 1/4 inch braided elastic. The reason why I use braided is because it doesn't disintegrate as much after multiple washes. This is what I used for costumes and things like that. Bias tape, if you don't have a bias tape maker, you can make it. It's a little bit more difficult, but I'm going to show you that process, or you can just buy it. And Joann's right now, I know that they're doing, you can order online and they'll bring it out to your car, so that's a great service also. And then the last thing, if you'll back up, I'm going to show you that we're using twist ties. Now these are twist ties for the garden. We bought these over at Home Depot. And then they're pretty long, and then I cut them in half. So what this is going to do is this is going to hold that nose area so it forms to your face. So I'm going to go through the process right now. Hey B, you getting your pins? Okay, scooch over, darling. This is my daughter Beata. Say hi to everybody. If you're a friend of mine, you should know her anyway, because everybody knows Beata. She's amazing. So I'm going to take my material. You can layer it like this, so that way you only have to cut pieces once. And I'm going to go through one from beginning until end. Laying this out, trying to flatten. We do iron it. It doesn't look like it's ironed, but we try to iron it as much as we possibly can. Scooch over just a little bit, darling. Thank you. I'm cutting off this extra little piece that every piece of material has. Just cutting that off to make sure that I'm not using that when I'm sewing my pattern. Okay? Get it nice and flat. Make sure that it's straight. And I'm going to try to do as straight of lines as I possibly can. So since this is straight on my board, I'm going to even out my bottom. And what I use is I use a straight razor. You can cut it. You can use fabric marker. See my razor, I need to replace it, but I'm not going to the store to replace it. I got too much to do. So go ahead and do that. The piece of the material that we're cutting to make one mask is 15 inches by 7.5 inches. This is for an adult size. You can do it smaller for kids. I was doing 13 by 6 inches for children, but right now I'm focusing on adults because the children should be at home anyway, so I'm focusing on adults. So here's my 15 inches. Excuse me?
Say measurements again.
Measurements are, sorry, I'm cutting it out right now. 15 inches. Now, if you have writing on your material, you want to make sure that the writing is going this way because of how the mask is going to be made. 15 inches by 7.5. So I'm going to go ahead and do so I'm sitting at the 10 right there. Pull this over all the way to the end. And it's easy enough to see that I'm going to do 7.5 inches, okay? So one piece of this material is your mask. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, is I'm going to take this over to my serger. If you don't have a serger, it doesn't matter. I'm using my serger to just do the edges nice and finished. Excuse me, babe. You can stay right there. It's totally fine. And all I'm going to do is on the short side, I'm going to take and serge my edges just to do a nice finished stitch. One side. And the other side. Done. Now I'm going to go back over here. And then I take my material and I'm going to fold it the right side facing each other. So the wrong side is out, right side is inside. And I'm going to measure 1.5 inches from that side. I'm going to place a pin right there. And 1.5 inches from that side. And I'm going to place a pin at that 1.5 inches. Okay? Now I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and do a straight stitch. And I'm just using, I'm not using too big of a stitch, but I'm not using too small of a stitch either. Just a nice medium-sized stitch because you want to make sure that it holds. This is going to be the opening of our mask. 1/4 inch seam allowance, go back and forth to lock it in, go back and forth up to that pin, and then you can come out of there. Make sure that you have a locking stitch on both the beginning and the end. Lock that stitch in. Now I'm going to this. Mom, I'll be coming over there in just a second. So I'm going to do my locking stitch right where that pin is and a locking stitch at the end. Okay? Now we're going over to our iron because I want to iron open this area after I get my threads off. And I have threads everywhere, so coming over to my iron. Now my iron has already been on and set because we're making bias tape also. To make the bias tape, you're going to do a 2-inch piece, and I'll show you that in just a second. But for right now, do you see how I pulled that seam out? This is where I just sewed, and this is my opening where I didn't sew. I'm going to iron this down so it's easier for me to sew the next part of it. Okay, now bias tape, and I'm going to use a different material so you can see I cut it in 2 inches. It does not matter how long it is because on each side of the mask I'm only going to use approximately that much. I'm not going to use the whole length of it. This will give me probably 2 masks worth of the bias tape. Now, I have a bias tape maker. This is a 2-inch bias tape maker. If you don't have it, you'll see how the fold works, but this is really, really convenient. So when I'm using the bias tape maker, I put my right side down, and you'll see that the little handle is up on this, okay? My bias tape maker, I put the material in, okay? So it goes up on each side. I don't know if you can see that, but it goes up on each of those sides. And then to start threading it through, I take my scissor and I just push that material so it starts coming through the end. And you can see that there's a little bit popping out there. Then what you're gonna see is that it folds both sides over. So see, it folds both sides over evenly, well, most of the time evenly. So it creates my bias tape, okay? Now what I do, see how it's folded and they kind of touch in the center? See how they fold and they touch in the center? You can manually do this. You can do it by yourself. This just takes me a lot less time because look, then I just iron it. It gives me that bias tape to put on the side of my mask. It came out just a little bit open at the end, but that's okay. And then I fold it over and I give it a nice little ironing there also because I'm going to be using this in just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to take my bias tape and I'm going to take this with me, okay? I'm coming back over to my sewing machine. Now, one of the important things to think about is I'm going to turn this right side out, okay? Now, if you have writing, I'm doing this for people who have writing on it or a pattern that goes a certain direction. But if you don't have a pattern that goes a certain direction, just do whichever side. It doesn't make a difference. So here's my up, okay? So when people have the mask on, you want the writing like this. So what I need to do is, here's my seam. So I just flipped it from writing is correct, flip it over, and here's my opening, okay? I'm going to measure from this seam 1/2 of an inch, okay? And that 1/2 inch, I'm going to take the material and fold it like that, okay? Now I actually, oh, you know what? I forgot a step. Hold on one second. So this is the bottom of that opening, okay? Totally forgot a step, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So the bottom of the opening is here. I'm going to create just a stitch on that bottom of the opening so it holds and it doesn't open up. Okay, so keep it with the right side out, and I just do my locking stitch. And see how there's like, I'm sewing in this little hole, okay? So I just use my fingers to just guide it to do a nice stitch down this side, all the way down, and you'll see now is where that was my 1.5 inch stitch. I'm just coming and I'm moving the material out of the way, do my locking stitch, and now I'm gonna have a nice seam there. So that way that doesn't open up and you don't get a whole bunch of strings of the material just going everywhere and start fraying, okay? So I did my stitch on the bottom, okay? Now I measure from the seam 1/2 inch from that seam, and I'm gonna go ahead and put my pin right there. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of these strings. And I do my 1/2 inch, and I'm gonna put my pin there, okay? I'm going to stitch a very small seam allowance down this side, down the bottom, and back up this side. Now, when I say a small seam allowance, it's probably 1/8 of an inch of a seam allowance, because my bias tape is gonna go over that, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and go down this side. Do my locking stitch, take my pin out, and what I do is I just use my fingers. Got a little bit of craziness going on there. I use my fingers to make sure that those seams line up, the edge of the material lines up, and I'm just gonna go ahead and take a nice stitch all the way down, almost to the bottom, about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom, lift up my foot, turn the material. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that this side lines up. Take your fingers from the top, make sure that that side lines up. And now I'm gonna sew across the bottom until I get to the other side. Boom, I'm about 1/8 of an inch. Lift up my foot, turn the material, and then sew up this side. Woo, that just stuck me. Back and forth to lock that stitch in, okay? Cut off your threads. Now is where we're going to put the nose piece in. Now the nose piece is super, super important. This keeps the mask, and I'll show you on my mask, because this one is mine. I have the metal piece, it sits right there. And what happens is you pinch this, and then it creates that seal because that metal holds it up against my face, okay? So this is a super, super important part of it. So I take my little piece, all right? And remember we had the seam on the bottom, and this one doesn't have a seam yet. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna put it right towards the top where that fold is. So it's inside there, okay? And you can feel the metal because I can feel it there. Now what I do is I wanna make sure that that metal doesn't slide left to right or up and down. So my metal is right there. I stick a pin in so it holds it. I stick a pin in over to the side. Here's where it ends. I'm gonna stick it just to the side of that. and then I feel where my metal is there. See, my metal's already slipped down. I'm going to push that up to that fold. Okay, now there's the end of my metal, and I'm just going to put a pin in there, and basically we're just creating a little cavity for that. Okay, now I'm going to take approximately a 1/4 of an inch stitch down this top. We're going to get that that little piece of metal sewn in. So go ahead and do my locking stitch. Now I'm going to go right to where my pin is. Okay, I'm going to take my pin out. I'm going to lift up my foot, turn the material, and now I'm going to create a little locking stitch to hold in that piece of metal. So I go a little bit forward, go back, and then I get to where I was just at. Lift up my foot, turn my material. Then you'll see, you can feel it, that the metal is right there. I'm going to stitch to create that little home for the metal. Pull out my pin right down there and come to this pin right here. Okay, put my needle down, lift my foot, turn it around, create my locking stitch, lock in that metal, make sure that my needle is down, turn, and finish off my stitch nice and quick, okay? And I do a locking stitch at the end. So now you can see that the metal is caught in here and it can be formed to everybody's face, okay? So now we're ready to do our pleats. Now, here's the most important thing on the pleats. Here's my hole right on the top here. I'm going to flip this towards myself so the hole is underneath here, okay? And I'm going to tell you the reason why that's important is because your first pleat is going to be your biggest pleat, and that gives you the availability of putting that filter inside, okay? So I go approximately an inch, maybe a little bit more than an inch, and that's going to be my fold, and I fold it over, okay? Now look, so you have about a 1/2 inch underneath, about a 1/2 inch fold there. That's going to be my first pleat. Take your pin, make sure that the head of your pin is towards the inside, okay? Head of your pin is towards the inside. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Head of your pin is towards the inside. This is easier putting the bias tape on, and that's going to be next. Then I go approximately 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch, and I do the same exact thing, and I fold over, okay? Take my pin, put it towards the inside, take my pin, make sure it's towards the inside, and you want to make sure that your pleats are pretty even, but I'm not sitting here measuring because I have so many masks to do. It's not that important. If you have a little bit off, that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that this is your biggest one. Then on the bottom, it's going to be the smallest. So I take about, a 1/2 inch or so, and then I place it over there. Once again, pins towards the inside, pins towards the inside. Okay, so you can see that that's the making of my mask, right? Now I'm going to take my bias tape. Remember, we did this bias tape, right? So I'm going to measure it. Now I use my serger to give myself a finishing stitch. So I just do 2 of these, one for this side, one for the other. And remember, we already ironed this. And then, like I said, I'm going to use my serger to finish off. I use a nice tight stitch on the serger so that way it doesn't unravel or anything like that within the process of people wearing the mask constantly. Okay, so there's where my folds were, and I'm going to just go across the whole one. So look, remember we ironed it this way. We're going to definitely use this, but I want to open it up. I'm going to serge both sides of both of them. Okay, so that's what it came out looking like, and I got my strings off the side, which is totally fine. This is going to make it to where the material doesn't fray. That's why I use this, okay? So now, you see my pins are up, and that's totally fine. I match up. So how the fold is, see how that fold is? This is what's going to happen. It's going to go around that material, so I only have to do one stitch. And it's also going to create a tube for the elastic to go through. That's why I did it this way, okay? So I place it there to where it's almost even with that fold, and then I fold it over, and I pin through all layers, and you'll see I have caught the back because I'm going to take a stitch and catch all of this together. I'm going to do that again. I place it evenly with the bottom, I fold it over, and then I'm going to place another pin right there. So I do this on both sides. All right. And guess what? We are actually almost done, if you can believe that. Once you start getting the hang of this, it really doesn't take a long period of time. The preparation takes the most by cutting the materials out. We have about, we just finished 50. We have about 50 more in the works right now. But we also have 3 people doing 3 different jobs to make sure that it's getting taken care of. Okay? So I just pinned down both sides, right? Now, if I was being crazy, I don't like that one has pink and that one has green, but it's okay. Somebody will love it, and that's fine. We're doing it for their safety. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this in here, and I'm going to take my stitch right there, basically right where the pin is, because I want to catch the back material, I want to catch the mask, and I want to catch the front material with having a little tube to put my elastic through. Okay, so I'm going to place that in there, put my foot down. I'm going to do my locking stitch, lock it a whole bunch of times because that's going to hold that onto the mask. Take my first pin out, and then I'm going to pull this just a little bit, okay? I'm going to still do the same thing. I'm going to come down here, making sure that I'm catching everything on the front and the back side. Do that locking stitch a whole bunch of times on the bottom, pull it out, cut off all your strings on the top and the bottom, and then you can pull out your pins. I just pulled out the pins that were doing the pleating. Now I'm going to do the same on the other side. Notice I put my pins in a direction where it's easy for me to pull those pins out. This is just simple sewing stuff. You make sure that your pins are in the right direction for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. I'm going to do that locking stitch a whole bunch of times just to make sure I pull out that first pin that's holding that. And I'm going to come all the way down. And I'm going to sew all the way to the end and do that locking stitch on the end. Mom? Okay? So the bag. Bill, right?
Yes.
All right.
Got an assembly line.
Yes, we're making a video right now. So, okay, so there's my mask. So what I need to do now, thank you. What I need to do now is I have 10-inch pieces of elastic cut, 10 inches. And this is what my daughter was doing just a second ago. I put my daughter to work. She's 7 years old. She likes to help. And I had her just put the pins on, okay? So both pieces of elastic, you put a pin on them, all right? There you go. I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to place it into that little hole, okay? You see how I did that? Because of the way I sewed it, I just did it that way. I'm going to place it in there. Now, I just feed it through. Now, sometimes this can get pretty hard. Basically, I just try to push that pin through and pull, push and pull. Get that pin going all the way to the end. And like I said, sometimes it gets hard. And if that pin opens up, then you have to start again. And look, it opened up, so I'm going to have to start again. Okay? So I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to put that pin in and bring it all the way through. Trying not to open up that pin. You just push it, Ah, it opened up again. Guess what? This pin is going away. All right, do it with this pin. Let's do it this side. How's that? Okay, putting my pin in, taking it through. That's the most problems I have had with anything this whole morning, of course. Okay, so I'm taking this all the way through, and you'll see, there's my pin. Okay, take the pin off. Now I'm doing this. People can adjust their elastic to different sizes. I take it about a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch, and I put them together. So one more time, I say a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch, and I put them together. All right, you can pin it so you can sew it. I'm just putting it under my machine. And I go front and back a couple of times. Make sure that my needle is down. Pick up my foot, I turn it, and I sew down the length of it also. This just gives a little bit more security with that elastic, okay? So there's that. Now, there's my hole to put the filter in, okay? Now I take that elastic and I just go ahead and put it into my casing so that way you don't see that. That way people can adjust their elastic if they want to. They can make it smaller, they can make it a little bit bigger because I have that 1/2 inch to use. But it just gives them the ability to change that size. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So my pin goes in my elastic. Bring it all the way through. Yep, it was just that pin because this one's going through. Okay, same thing, one more time. Take my elastic, make sure that it's not folded anywhere, and then I lay it on top. Okay, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. And I just place it under my needle. This is probably the hardest part of the whole mask in reality. Okay, make sure my needle is down. I'm gonna turn that elastic, and I'm gonna go front and back, just to lock that in, pull it away. Sometimes you'll have a little bit of extra strings. I just pull them, cut this off, and then now I'm gonna hide that connection piece in my little casing, and voila. So now that was a complete mask. You have your thing up the top, you can do your nose. Here's the hole to where you can put another medical mask. You can put a filter. You can put whatever you'd like in there. Like I said, these are just all pre-washed cotton, but they're going to help people. So thank you so much for watching. And the filters that we're using for ourselves is from our air filter. And there are different brands, there are different things that you can use. This one is for dust, airborne allergens, a whole bunch of different things. This is what we are using for our family. And basically all these things are helped to not get into that mask. I took apart this filter. I took the cardboard off and I took the metal off. And then this is what it looks like. It becomes this, okay? And when you're basically, sometimes if you pull too hard when you're getting that metal off or anything, it'll get holes in it. That's not gonna help you. When you're cutting this filter, it's a 6-inch piece by 5-inch or 6.5 inch by 5-inch, okay? So I'm just gonna put this at the 10 and I'm gonna go to 16.5 and I'm gonna come up to that 5 and I'm gonna go across, okay? Now what I do with this is, see how it has the accordion already? We wanna keep that accordion this way. That's why I did 6.5 to the side and 5 up. So when you're cutting it, make sure that you're cutting it wider where the accordion goes this way. Okay, I'm gonna show you exactly what I do with this now. So I'm taking this just over to the serger. I'm gonna serge this way first, And I just use that same stitch on there. And then I'm going to do the bottom. Now when doing the sides, now I've been doing this for a long time, so I basically just do it with my fingers. You can pin it, but remember on a serger, it's gonna cut the tips of those pins, but if you're doing it on a machine, you can go over the pins. I basically just stick the front in. I mash it up because you want that accordion happening. I just mash it up. And so it gets that accordion on the side. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to start, I mash it up. So this is optional. This is your, see how it takes that form? That's from serging on the side. This is an optional thing to do. You can take and cut off these extra little pieces, leave a little bit so it doesn't unravel. And then what you do is you put it inside that mask, making sure that it's flat inside there. Now, what we're doing is each day that we wear the mask, we take the filter out, wash the mask, and then you can put the filter back in, okay? So there's your mask. It's a little bit folded in there, okay? But this is just an option of something that you can do, okay? And there's your mask. It's a little bit catawonky because that filter's in there a little bit catawonky, but for all my friends who are asking about this pattern, it took me 10 minutes to do, okay? Now, I've been sewing for a long time. It may take people longer, but if you can help one person who's not getting supplies, then that's awesome. I put it out there and I'm going to put it out there again. This is not medical grade. This is a person just trying to help people who aren't getting the supplies, and it is not N95, obviously. It is not. But if there's anybody out there who could use one of these, they can put this over an N95 and then they can wash this because they're having to reuse those N95s, okay? If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I am going to be sewing all day, so I'll be here, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. Have a great day.